Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to speak to the committee stage of this bill, and I want to speak a little bit about the title of the bill, because I think there are some more fitting titles for this bill, and I think that it would be useful to consider them as sensible amendments to the bill to more clearly illustrate just what this bill is doing, to make it transparent to the public what is happening when this bill is passed, so that people are not surprised further down the track when their bills go up. They're not surprised that a new tax has been put on them. They are not surprised that there is government waste, and not surprised that there's another broken promise from this government. I also want to address a point, though, first raised by Tracy Martin in her contribution earlier, which was a good one, I have to say. The issues are being debated here, and whilst we may disagree on whether this bill should be supported or not at this stage, part of the point, of course, of the committee stage is to hammer out the ideas and to have the full debate and to say, well, you know, is this a good idea or a bad idea? We're pretty firmly convinced it's a bad idea. Now, but Ms Martin raised a very sensible question: how otherwise would this be funded? And from this side of the House, there is two things from the Labor side that we would say are obvious. The first is that it's not wise to fund something that isn't working. And because there's been no evaluation of the existing program, it makes very little sense at all to continue to fund something that hasn't been proved to be effective, to be working. Now, if we put that to one side, because we all do want good rural broadband, I think that is the one point everybody around the House is unanimous on. It is something that will take the country forward. The government seems to have a somewhat limited vision for what might be possible, but we would all agree it needs to be better. I would wonder whether the government might not consider investing its future investment fund in such an activity. I mean, what is that fund for if it's not for investing in future infrastructure? It seems the most logical thing in the world that the government might choose to invest that money in. If we put to one side the fact that it's promised to spend it, you know, I don't know, 10 or 15 times over. It talked about paying off debt at one stage. Well, they're $88 billion in debt. The $4.8 billion they got from flogging off the family silver won't cover that. But if we actually take the promises that they've owned up to and put on ink in terms of the future investment fund, this would seem to be a sensible thing to fund that out of, rather than imposing a new tax on users. And we've seen earlier this evening Spark come out and say this is a tax that they will be transparently passing on to their customers. We've had the Telecommunications Forum come out and say they've been bearing the costs in this industry and they can't continue to bear them any longer because they thought this was time limited, this tax. But a new tax has been issued that takes it forever into the future. This government has promised not to introduce a new tax, and now it is. So the first of the alternative titles I would suggest should be considered by the government is, let's just call it what it is. Let's call it the Telecommunications Development Tax Amendment Act. The Development Tax Amendment Act. This is a government that's trying to introduce 3 new taxes despite having a promise, crossed fingers behind their back, that they would introduce no new taxes if they were elected. In this budget we've got 3 of them. And this is a government that is introducing a new tax, and we've had the proof of that, of course, in the departmental disclosure statement, which says quite clearly, and I quote from it, "Does this bill create or amend a power to impose a fee, levy or charge in the nature of a tax?" And the department says, in the biggest letters on the page, yes. Yes, this is in the nature of a tax. Bill English has tried to deny that, but the public of New Zealand know a tax when they see one. It's an additional charge on top of what they're currently being charged, exactly what the industry now proposes to pass on transparently as an additional charge. So we've got that, and that makes sense to call it, therefore, this Act, the Telecommunications Development Tax Amendment Act. That would be plainer, that would be clearer. More people know what a tax is than a levy. It's a nice, clear way of saying what it is. Now, this tax, of course, is going to be imposed on small businesses around the country. We know from Telecom, from their estimate, that they think that it will cost about $1 each, Mr Chair, that it will cost about $1 more.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Chair.
Thank you, Mr